So today we are talking about planning the week. So this is part 2 of a 4-part series that I'm doing very deliberately, intentionally at this time of year when, well, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on personally, if you are like navigating a family and Christmas and all of the things you want to do to reconnect with people at this special time. And there's a lot going on at work. This typically is one of the peak times in the year, especially for you as a lawyer, where there are just so many demands being made of you. Everybody wants everything all at once by the end of the year. So I think overwhelm, it's certainly on my clients' minds. It has been on my mind. And for sure, it is on your mind right now, or you're not far away from a period, given the nature of this work, when overwhelm will be a thing, a potential thing for you in the future. So you're going to find this really useful. So in part 1 of this Overwhelm series, that was episode 68, I talked about getting out of crisis, the crisis of overwhelm. And the key message there was to really get you to think about your mindset, how your thoughts about time impact your experience of time. And when you are in a crisis of overwhelm, this is so... I want to offer that this is the most effective tool to get you out of that crisis. What I'm going to be teaching in this session and in the next following 2 sessions that form this series are very much sort of tactics, right? Practical tactics and tools. But when you're in crisis, it's so important that you start with your mindset. That's the most effective place to intervene so that you can turn things around, rather than just trying to do lots of tactics and implement tools when things are at a crisis point. Okay, so that was what part 1 was about. And if you missed part 1, I really want to encourage you to go back and listen to it. So it's episode 68, as I said. Listen to that, because that mindset piece, it's essential if you're in crisis, but it also forms the foundation of any work that you do, any work you do to implement the tools and tactics I'm going to teach you in this session, which is part 2, and in parts 3 and 4. Okay, so the thinking part, your mindset, how you think about time and how that impacts your experience of time, all of this is absolutely key, really important. You want to make sure that you have an understanding of how that works. Okay. To today's session then, part 2, which is about planning the week. Now, before we start, a couple of words around what I mean by managing overwhelm. So if part 1 was overwhelm, like dealing with the crisis of overwhelm, getting out of crisis, parts 2, 3, and 4 of this series are about managing overwhelm. And I choose that expression very specifically. I choose that as an objective, as our goal, very deliberately. And so I want to clarify what I mean by that. Managing overwhelm. I'm not talking about getting rid of overwhelm, never experiencing overwhelm again. It's very much managing it. And implicit is that in that, and the reason for using that expression are 2 things. 1, it's accepting that overwhelm will happen. You are a lawyer. You work in a very demanding, high-performing industry. You will, from time to time, feel overwhelmed. Like the experience, that feeling, that emotion will be part of your experience as a lawyer. And it's important to acknowledge that, to recognize that, so that when it does happen, you know that nothing's gone wrong. It's not an immediate panic, like it shouldn't be like this, I shouldn't be feeling overwhelmed. And it's important not to have the kind of resistance to it that those thoughts would produce, because that's what makes it really hard to tackle it and then manage it in a way that you can come out of overwhelm, right? So it's really important, the acceptance bit, so that you're not expending energy and effort resisting and asking what, arguing with reality, resisting the fact that the industry is what it is and you work in a very high performing environment. The second part of managing overwhelm is about really encouraging you to think about catching it before it becomes a crisis. So when you, and this is the awareness piece of when you are feeling overwhelmed and being able to notice that feeling, be mindful of it, and then intervene so that that feeling of overwhelm doesn't become a crisis. And of course, so that you can manage yourself out of that overwhelm. Okay. So I hope that's made it clear that when we're talking about managing overwhelm, there's never the expectation that overwhelm becomes something you never experience. But what we're saying is we know it's going to come up, but when it does come up, you will know what to do. You will know what to do to get out of overwhelm, and you will know what to do to make sure that that overwhelm doesn't become a crisis. Hopefully that's clear. Okay, so back to today's tool, which is planning the week. This is one of the tools, one of the tactics I want to offer you to help you manage overwhelm. And the reason why this is so important is because the number one mistake that I see lawyers making all the time, it's like a constant, is winging it. Like actually believing that you can show up in a really high performing role, high performing environment, high pressured environment, and just like get straight into action and reacting to everything that comes up. So no planning, right? No forethought, no looking ahead. You're just going into each day and just doing. Now, I know why this is. I know that the main reason behind this is work can be very unpredictable. And particularly if you're very junior, you are not typically in control of your work schedule. You're not in control of your workload. But what that does is, if you allow it to, your brain will then switch off and take the view that, well, I can't control anything. So many of you say to me, oh, well, my work's far too unpredictable. I couldn't possibly plan the week. There's no point because I don't know what's going to happen from one day to another. And this is what you tell yourselves. And what I want to offer is this is a kind of lazy way of thinking on the part of your brain. It's an all or nothing thinking. It's like that if I can't control everything in my schedule, then I'm just going to assume I can't control anything in my schedule and not bother to plan, not bother trying to control it. I'm just going to wing it. I'm just going to do whatever comes up. I'm firefighting. That's one of your favorite expressions. And it's like the flip side of winging it. Winging it has a sort of romantic almost idea of like I'm flying by the seat of my pants type feeling, which some of you really like. Whereas firefighting, it's another form of the same thing where there's no planning, you're still being very reactive, and it being like what I hear is it being something that's a state that you just accept is your experience of being a lawyer. Like I'm firefighting, things that I'm just putting out fires. Okay, so this is the mistake. It's the assumption that you can't control anything and the willingness to really go through every day and really build a whole career either winging it in kind of a fun way or like firefighting in a like more stressful, high pressured way. And what I want to offer here is that when you do that, when you wing it, when you just firefight and that becomes your normal way of operating, you are setting yourself up for failure. And by that, I mean failure. I just mean you're setting yourself up to always be overwhelmed, to always feel out of control. There's a quote which I love, which really helps me to stay in the value and importance of not winging it, not firefighting, but really recognizing the value of planning. And that is fail to plan, plan to fail. A quote attributed to Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers. And I love this quote because it's just so simple. It captures it. If you don't plan, then expect to fail. All sounds very dramatic. But when you implement what I'm going to teach you, start using the tool that I'm going to offer you today and really build the skill of using that tool, right? And is implementing it, making it your part of your day-to-day operations, how you operate in this industry, you are going to notice a difference. And it will feel like, oh my gosh, that was like little forms of failure every single day because I didn't plan. Okay, so the other reasons why this is so important, planning, this thing that you typically don't want to do, think you're too busy to do, is because planning, it is the simplest, most effective and accessible tool for managing overwhelm. When you plan, you will, number one, know what to expect. You know what's coming up. That's going to help you feel so much more in control of your life, of your time, of your role, right? That's going to make a huge difference. Number two, planning is going to help you make, or it's what enables you to make crucial decisions about what to do and when to do it, right? And what to do next. All of those things are very important. And the thing I want to add here as a way to think about it is the part of your brain that you use for planning is different to the part of your brain that you use for, or how your brain works. I'm not a brain expert, by the way, but we do use different parts of our brain for different tasks. And planning is a very different task to doing, right? Planning is a much more, what I'll describe as a higher level task, where you are bringing a more sort of, I want to say a more intelligent approach and viewpoint to it's like a more intelligent thought process. So when you're planning, it happens at a much higher level versus when you're reacting to something, that is much more our kind of, I want to say our animal brain. It's like part of our sort of instinctive nature it is the firefighting, it is the fire, the reacting, right? That is a different part of our brain. And the point is that the part of your brain that you use for planning is the one that tends to make better decisions about what you do next, because it's able to take a more holistic view of what's going on. It has the bigger picture. It knows what your long-term objective is, versus when you're in the thick of it, you're winging it, or you're firefighting, that part of your brain isn't interested in what's happening tomorrow or a week from now or what your long-term goal is. It's only interested in the now, reacting to what's coming up, reacting to the discomfort you're feeling with what's coming up or what needs to happen now. So the thing about planning is it gives you access to that higher level part of your brain that can make really important decisions about what you need to do and when you need to do it. And of course, those decisions are hugely going to impact like whether you're able to meet deadlines. They're going to impact how stressed you feel when you are running up against those deadlines. It's going to impact your ability to meet those deadlines. I think I may have already said that, but you get the point, right? It helps you make those crucial decisions. And then finally, why planning is such a simple and accessible and important tool is because in addition to it, you knowing what to expect in those crucial decisions, it also helps you make crucial adjustments. Now, those crucial adjustments are, for example, and these are the key ones that we talk about in Be the First, the progression coaching program for Black lawyers. Those adjustments are delegating, like what will you delegate? Automating, like what can you put on autopilot? Like what doesn't require that you reinvent the wheel every time? And then also crucially eliminating, right? So delegate, automate, and eliminate. Those are three crucial adjustments that you want to be able to make. That if you can make those with your the planning part of your brain, are going to be really impactful when it comes to managing your workload. Okay, so here's what you're going to take away from this session. Number one, this is my objective for you, that you will start to view planning as an essential tool in your toolkit. When you think about this session as part of a series, what I'm giving you in part 2, part 3, and part 4 are tools that you will have in your toolkit. I want you to start thinking about planning that way. It's a tool you get to use, you get to access, okay? And you get to have and develop your skill of using to support you to be as effective in your career and as efficient and to perform at your highest potential, okay? So number one, to see it as a tool. Number two is to also think about planning as something that is an investment. Of course, it requires some time. It's an investment of your time that is going to really produce like give you an exponential return. Spend 10 minutes planning and you save potentially an hour, potentially a day in the actual execution. Okay, that's how impactful it is. The third thing you're going to take away from this session is you're going to know how to plan. I'm going to tell you exactly how to do it. I'm going to give you the steps so you can start working on that, implementing those steps, building this skill right now from today, which is going to be so useful for those of you who are right in the thick of it right now. And then finally, I want this session to motivate you to take action. So I know it's so easy to consume what I teach you on the podcast. It's easy to consume what you read in my emails or on social media in my posts. I want you to be motivated to start planning today. Even if it's not the beginning of the week, even if it's not the beginning of the day, you could literally just take 5 minutes as a result of listening to this episode. Even if you're out on a walk or on your commute, take 5 minutes and plan something, okay? So that you can immediately start to feel the effect that that has and how you can feel less overwhelmed really quickly, really easily. Okay, now this is more than about just where you are right now. This skill of planning is going to serve you your whole career. I always think about like, what's the lasting impact of what I'm trying to teach you? And for this particular skill, what you're going to have, which I want you to think about how valuable this is. You will always be able to manage overwhelm. Like knowing, okay, even if I become overwhelmed, even if this is starting to feel overwhelming, even when things are going crazy right now, I know I'm someone who can always manage it. That's such a big part of, it's such a big up level for your self-concept, how you think about yourself. So you'll start to think about yourself as someone who, even when things get overwhelming, it's never a problem because you have the skills to manage it. And then the other lasting impact, which is really key, is that you are going to be less hesitant and more ready to progress your career because you know you'll be able to manage. I know that one of the things that really puts you off going to that next level is the fear of how much extra work it will be. The fear of, will I be able to manage with the additional responsibility? Thinking about where you are now and how much of a struggle it already feels, there is that fear, isn't there? That like, oh my gosh, well, if I went any further, it would just get worse. And I'm not even coping where I am. Learning to use what I'm teaching you in this series, learning to plan, that being a skill that you really develop and build, it being a tool in your toolkit is going to change all of that. It's going to embolden you, going to give you the confidence to keep progressing and know that you are going to be okay and that you can rise to the challenge of whatever the new level of responsibility and commitment is for you. All right, so let's break down when you think about what's going on for you right now. You may be thinking, this is all too much. There's not enough time. There's never enough time, never enough hours in the day. That's a common expression. You may be thinking, I have no control over my time. Now, if those are your thoughts, I want to again remind you of the importance of your thinking and the impact that that has on your ability to control your time. And remember, I'm going to refer you back to part 1 of this series, which was about the mindset, about your thinking, and about choosing thoughts that are more powerful, that serve you, and are going to improve your relationship with time. So if those are the thoughts, then that's what we want to be aware of. Like, okay, my thoughts about time are also creating and impacting my relationship with time. They're basically one of the things that are causing the overwhelm. Now, what's also going on for you is how you are feeling. So you're feeling most likely exhausted, overwhelmed. You are almost certainly feeling stressed, and it could be you're reaching the point where you're feeling stuck and hopeless. I want you to be aware of those feelings. Start to think about and connect with what those feelings are like in your body. Like, what does exhausted feel like? What does overwhelmed, stressed, what does hopeless and stuck feel like in your body? What we want is to be able to have that intelligence around what's going on physically inside of you so that you can recognize when overwhelm is starting to build up. And those are key emotions that come up when you have that feeling of not being in control and there's too much to do, and you have those thoughts about like there not being enough time in the day. Okay, so what about how you're showing up and what you're doing right now? And I want you to think about this, how you are showing up as a result of this overwhelm, or what demonstrates that you are in overwhelm, so you can recognize it. So if you are constantly falling into your day, so it's everything. And actually, there's 2 parts to this. There's the falling into your day and what I visualize when I say that and how I want you to experience that expression is it's almost like you get out of bed and you literally just kind of roll out of bed and you're immediately in your day. No time for thinking, no time for looking ahead at what's coming up. You literally, from the minute you get up, it's like rush, 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 one thing after another. The next thing you're at your desk and you're like, right, where do I start? What's going on? So it's going into your day without an idea of what to expect, of what's coming up. And the first you know of it is when you're sitting at your desk. Yeah. So if that's something that you're doing, then if you're not feeling overwhelmed now, you very soon will be, because that is a recipe for overwhelm as soon as things get busy, as soon as more work starts coming in. You are reacting, like ping-ponging between tasks. You know, a task come up on email and you're like, maybe start doing that. You start responding to it. Or then somebody comes in, gives you another task. You then jump to that one. And then there's a task you were doing before you looked at your emails, and then you go back to that one and you're ping-ponging between tasks. So if you're doing that, it's a sign, like recognize the signs that that is you in overwhelm or you moving very fast towards it. Saying yes to everything. Now, sometimes you can say yes to everything because you have capacity. But if you're saying yes when at the same time there's a voice in your brain going, how am I going to get this done? Like, how am I going to fit this in? I have no idea how, but I have to say yes because I can't say no. If you are saying yes by almost like as a reaction rather than it being a considered and intentional yes, again, a sign of overwhelm. You want to recognize this sign. Also, if you are someone, and this is connected to the saying yes to everything, if you are struggling as a rule, you're someone who struggles to set boundaries. If you are someone who never manages expectations, and how you know this is you is that you are given a piece of work, you're given a deadline, and then it gets to the deadline, and then at the deadline you say, I'm really sorry, I haven't been able to do it. So you let the deadline arrive before it becomes apparent that you weren't able to meet the deadline. So you didn't set expectations beforehand. If this is you, this is a sign of overwhelm. This is a sign that like it's too much. You're not managing. You are overwhelmed. Okay. So I've talked you through the kind of thoughts that you might be having, the feelings you might be feeling, and what you are doing so that you can recognize all of these signs of overwhelm and start implementing, or know it's time to implement what I'm teaching you in this session. Okay. Before I come to what I want you to do differently, before I give you this tool and talk you through how to use it and how to build it as a skill, I want to also remind you about what the cost is, right? What the impact of all of this is, what's going to happen if you continue working this way, if you continue with those thoughts and those feelings about how much time there is, if you keep working in a way where you're falling into your day, you're reactive all day, you're saying yes to everything from a place of, well, fear, a place of not knowing, a place of like just being in default yes to everything. And also, if you're not setting boundaries or managing expectations, what is going to happen is you are going to be at risk of burnout. The overwhelm will build up. It won't stay the same. It will keep increasing. Your work will become increasingly unsustainable. You'll be falling behind if you're not already. Your delivery will frequently be late, and you're going to start getting negative feedback. And that negative feedback might not be the feedback that you can very easily or as easily come back from, okay? Maybe feedback that has a negative impact on you, but also in a way that's like harmful for your career. We do not want that, absolutely not. And what I want to teach you and show you and reassure you is you implement what I teach, implement these tools, and those things will not be an issue for you. We'll not have to worry about the negative results that come from being in overwhelm over a sustained period of time. You will know that you can handle it and you can avoid those results and instead create something so much better. Create the feeling of being in control and managing your workload. Even though this industry can be unpredictable, even though there are things you don't know might come in or land on your desk, you don't know them ahead of time. You can still have the feeling of being in control and managing your workload. It's going to be such a different experience for you versus the being in overwhelm. Also, what you're going to be able to do is you're going to have more time for the other things that matter. More time for the things, in other words, outside of work, other people, your own self-care, your exercise, what nourishes you, what keeps you, what fills you up. You will have more time for that when you implement the tool for sure of planning the week. And the third thing you're going to create is just you being a better performer. When you are in control of your time, when you're also finding time for the things that matter, i.e. you are nourished and fulfilled outside of work, you are going to show up so much more effectively and powerfully in your work. The whole way in which you then operate, people's experience of you is going to be so different when you are in control, taking control, when you're planning versus when you're in overwhelm, winging it and firefighting. Like if I think about my clients and like when they first come to me in that reactive state, like I can see what the experience they create for their clients and for their bosses, the people that work for them, because the energy of overwhelm, what you transmit in terms of being out of control, other people do pick up on that, and their experience of working with you is impacted by that. So doing this work, it's so important, it's so valuable, because your performance will improve, but also how other people perceive you will improve as well when they see that performance improving. Okay, there's so much to gain from doing this work. And then finally, because you feel more in control, because you're performing well, you are so much more likely, you're so well set up for progression to the next level. You're going to be able to desire it, you're going to want it, knowing you can manage overwhelm when you get there, and you're going to be well set up for it because you were organized and because you're performing well and other people are seeing what it's like, seeing what you can produce and how you perform, but also having that much more positive experience of working with you, which is a key factor I might just emphasize in your progression. It's one of the things that will be considered, whether consciously or not, when people think about making you up to the next, promoting you to the next level. It's like, what's the experience of working with that person? Okay. So all of this you're going to achieve, I promise you this is available, simply by planning the week, and that becoming a skill you build and a tool you use constantly, just being who you are and what you do every single week. This is the tool, planning the week. Okay? And here's what will happen when you do this. Number one, you're going to know what's coming up. Like every single week, you're going to know what's coming up. Every day, you'll know what's coming up, which is going to minimize those unpleasant surprises of suddenly finding you've got an imminent deadline that you're not prepared for, or the surprise of when something does come up that is unexpected, like how unpleasant it is to like not be able to figure out where it's going to fit in, how you're going to get it done. The second thing that's going to happen is you are going to feel so much better prepared, right? Better prepared for everything. You know that feeling of being constantly late, being constantly rushed? It's a horrible feeling. I know that when I have that feeling, it makes me, I'm not at my best. I certainly don't enjoy my work at the highest level. And it's just a feeling that I always want to, like whenever it happens, I think, oh, I don't want to feel like this. This is not a great feeling. And in my body, it doesn't feel comfortable. So to be somebody who plans, who knows what's coming up, enables you to be better prepared so that you're not one of those people who's constantly late or constantly rushed. Again, I want to refer you back to what I was saying about other people's experience of working with you. This isn't only about your experience of how you work, that's the most important thing, but also about other people's experience of working with you, which is so important and so relevant when you are being considered for promotion or even being considered for work allocation. It is much easier and much more desirable for someone to delegate work or allocate an interesting project to someone they enjoy working with, to someone who creates a nice experience of working with them versus someone who's always rushed, always late, and creates that kind of stressed feeling. Looks like they're not in control. Thirdly, what else will happen is you are going to have room for the unknowns. Now, the unknowns, that's the term I use. We use that in Be the First, Progression for Black Lawyers. The unknowns are those things that come up which you did not see coming at all. Even with the best planning and preparation in the world, they just came out of left field, or they were very sudden, or there's a new deal or a new opportunity comes in out or seemingly out of nowhere. There are going to be those unknowns. It is part and parcel of working in this industry. What happens is when you plan, what it does is, first of all, it limits the unknowns to the real unknowns versus the ones that you think are unknowns, but actually were always likely to happen. I'm going to come back to speaking about those in a moment. I think there's a tendency, isn't there, to view a lot of the things that are either urgent or come up or that you're battling with or firefighting as like, I didn't know this was going to happen today. Like, I didn't know those comments were going to come in today from the other side and that there were going to be so many of them. And you want to tell yourself, your brain wants to say, and let yourself off the hook by saying, oh, well, I didn't know. That was an unknown. I couldn't have planned for that. When actually, if you send a document out to another side, then you know that there are going to be some comments coming back. That document is going to come back to you, right? So that is a known unknown. You might not know when it's coming back, but you know it's coming back. So there's a distinction between known unknowns and real unknowns. And one thing about planning is it will help you to distinguish between the two because how you deal with them is very different. And with planning, therefore, what you're able to do is you can create room for the unknowns, room for those completely, genuinely unpredictable events or projects that do come up. You will also develop this ability to accurately predict how long things will take you. I think I'm going to do like possibly even a whole training or podcast episode on this because it's very important, and I don't hear many people, I don't hear anybody talking about it, and it comes up and be the first, but not as a sort of thing in its own right. But actually this is a very important skill. Part of planning the week, as you'll see, will require you to be able to estimate how long things will take you, right? That's really important. And at the beginning, you're just guessing. You don't know how long things will take you. But what planning the week does is it forces you to guess, and then when you go and do it, and it turns out that it took you twice as long, for example, or half the amount of time, that educates you, that gives you more information, so that next time when you're estimating how long something will take, you'll have that information to inform that guess, and that guess will be more and more accurate over time. This is so important. It's important for your planning, obviously, to facilitate, but it's absolutely critical for your ability to manage your workload, your ability to, when somebody gives you a task and says they want it by a certain deadline, when you have the information, the knowledge of how long something will take you, you can therefore respond and manage their expectations if what they expect is nowhere near the actual reality of how long it takes you, for example. Likewise, if you know you're at full capacity in how long things take you, then when you're being asked to take on another project or another task, you can say very concretely, this task will take this amount of time. I'm at full capacity, literally do not have that time in my capacity available. That is going to give you so much more confidence to push back, to set boundaries, to say no, instead of just defaulting to saying yes to everything and then thinking, I'll worry about how I'm going to get it done later. So planning, what will happen when you do this, when you use this tool and it becomes part of how you work, you are going to develop this skill of knowing how long things take you, which is going to have a huge impact on your ability to set boundaries, to manage expectations, and also then to plan. Your planning is going to get better. And then finally, what's going to happen is you will have, I think, just more credibility generally. When people see you as somebody who plans, as somebody who manages expectations, as somebody who knows how long things take them, it will increase your credibility. I guess this is a little bit about their experience of working with you, but what it means is when you're able to say, I have 2 hours on Friday that I can actually dedicate to that because I can move the task that I was going to do to another time. Like, there's so much credibility in that response because you clearly know exactly how you can fit something in, what you can move. You sound and you are in control. Yeah, that's going to give you great credibility when it comes to then pushing back. I know that a lot of you, and this has happened with a couple of my clients, when you try to push back, the response is that it's not taken seriously. When you say I'm at full capacity, they don't take you seriously. And part of the reason for that I can see is that they have a perception that you're just disorganized, that you don't actually know how much capacity you have, and that you're just saying that because there's a lot going on, but you're not tangibly in control of your time and able to say with any like concrete, I was going to say evidence, like any certainty, right, what your schedule is and what you have time for. So planning, again, one of the brilliant things that will happen that you can expect when you start doing this is you will have more credibility in those conversations. All right, now let's talk about how you do it, how to plan your week. Now I have a step-by-step guide for you, which after like coaching so many hours and so many people, but also having developed this process that I use so effectively for myself, it's very important, like the order in which I recommend that you approach this. Yeah, this is the best order that I've seen to create the result of putting you more in control of your time, managing your overwhelm. Okay, so the first step is to get everything in one place, all of your tasks. Now, this is something that has actually changed my life when I realized that the very first starting point meant I had to collate. I had to know exactly where my tasks lived, right? Where do they accumulate? Where do I keep my tasks? So I used to think in the days where managing my time was a struggle, managing overwhelm was a struggle, I used to think I just had one to-do list. But what I realize is there are lots of different places that to-dos can appear and accumulate, right? So what I'm going to share with you are I think there are 5 different effectively to-do lists that I have going on at any one time. And I want you to listen to how many of those apply to you. So that first of all, you have that awareness, right? And start to think about, well, where do all of my to-dos occur? Where do they come up? But also, you might find it useful to think about how I separate my to-dos, how I operate this kind of multi-level to-do list. If you imagine, I guess, we could think of it as one to-do list, but there's just lots of different parts to it that appear in different places, however you want to think about it. But it might be interesting for you to think about your own to-do lists in this way, because I also find it helps me to stay on top of especially things that come in on the fly. Like I'm not always, for example, I keep my to-do list in Evernote, but I'm not always in Evernote when something comes up that I need to do, or I don't always have it to hand, or I might not have reception, or something might come up in a conversation. There are so many different areas or places where you can keep to-do lists, like your kind of sub-lists. And then when it comes to planning, what you want to do is get them all into one place. All right, without any more explaining of that, let me talk you through what those to-do lists are. So number 1 is the main to-do list. That means when I'm sitting down and I have my main list of things I have to do, whether in my business or in the house and home or for my boys or with the family, whatever it is going on in my personal life, there's a main list where when I'm organized, when I've got Evernote and it's working and I can go into it, I keep that as right, I've got a new task, that's where my list is. That's my master list. So Evernote is an app, so I type in my master to-do list. But the second list is a follow-up list. What is that? That means that when I'm doing a task, I might be typically this happens when I'm on a call or I'm actually coaching. And what I do is after each something I might be doing in the day, if there is a follow-up task to an initial task that I've just completed. So a great example of that is if I've coached a client and there are particular things that I want to remember, for example, for the client in their next session, that would be, typically something like that I would write up immediately. But let's say, after a meeting. So I've just had a meeting today with someone who's interested in me coming to speak at their organization, speak to their group of lawyers. Now, as a result of that call, which was in my calendar, I now need to follow up by sending a proposal. I have to send a proposal for what I'm going to talk about, what that will look like, and what I will need. Okay, so that goes on to my follow-up list. It wasn't on my list before. The only thing that was on my list before was the actual appointment in my calendar. So now I have follow-up work to do. And one of the things I learned and discovered was how much of my falling behind or feeling I was falling behind or feeling overwhelmed was the product of me not ever allowing for like a separate list of follow-up tasks that, for example, when I planned the week, at the start of the week, may come up throughout the week as I go through and I'm executing on that plan, right? So when I understood that that was a whole separate like set of to-dos that I needed to allow time for, that really helped. So now I have literally a separate notebook where I put my follow-up stuff. If I have time, that gets added to the master list. But usually when I'm just planning the week, I just bring all of it together. I've got my separate notebook in front of me. I've got my to-do list in front of me. I bring all of it together and I work directly from each list. Okay, so far I've talked about the master list, let's call it that, and I've talked about the follow-up list. The third list is the overflow list from the week before. This is for everything that I planned to do the week before, but I did not manage to get done. Either I didn't finish it or something else came up and I had to move a task to another week, or something happened that prevented me from doing it when I wanted to do it. There'll be some overflow tasks, and I find there are overflow tasks every single week, but it's not a problem. The beauty of planning the week means I always know what I haven't done. You know what it's like sometimes when you have that like, oh my gosh, I'd completely forgotten about that and now it's due. This doesn't happen when you plan the week, because you can see what you were supposed to do and then the things that you didn't do, that is like your overflow list. So I don't actually create a separate list for that, but what I do is review my plan for the week before, right? And I tick off everything that I did, and then I obviously highlight and note the things that I didn't do that I need to put into my that basically constitute an overflow, and I need to calendar the following week, all right? Or in the future. So we've talked about the master list, we've talked about the follow-up list, we've talked about the overflow list. The fourth place where your list is your calendar. So there's a list of appointments and meetings you have in your calendar. Those are to-dos as well. So that's your fourth source of to-dos when it comes to planning the week. And then last but absolutely by no means least, I call it what matters most. And your what matters most might vary a little bit from mine, but essentially what we're talking about here is the things you need to do to take care of yourself, your self-care. So your fitness, so your exercise, your diet, your downtime, your me time, your walking, whatever it might be. So your self-care is a great example. Also your connection to loved ones, to your family, to your friends. What matters most might be like getting enough like bits of fun in your life. It might be a hobby that matters to you a lot. Right, that is also a separate list that I keep it as a separate list as to what matters most. All right, so I've talked you through 5 actually different types of lists or sources of to-dos. It's very important you have the full picture, okay? And I just want to add as an interlude here, if that's sounding like a lot, if it's feeling like a lot, one of the things I want to offer you is you being able to get it all together in one place and look at it is going to calm you rather than stress you out, like genuinely, because there is nothing more stressful than knowing in the back of your mind there are all these things out there that you haven't done, but not really knowing exactly what they are or where they are or what might come up or what you've forgotten. The anxiety and stress of that over time especially is so much worse than saying, right, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to really properly, okay, let's look at everything all at once. The minute you do that, you take away the fear of the unknown. And most importantly, because you're doing this as part of the process, and when you join Be the First, Progression for Black Lawyers, it's something I guide you through and I coach you through. You are already in the state where you are bringing all of this together, looking at it with a view to solving for it, with a view to planning it and creating a system for yourself that enables you to do all of these things, those things that are required to be done, and do so in a way that feels calm and in control. Okay? So I promise you, if you're feeling any discomfort, then don't worry, that's normal, but that won't be for long, because soon you'll be in the energy and feeling of being in control, which is so much better. Okay, so you've got all of your sources, right, for all of your to-dos. Step 2 then of planning the week is you want to do a best guess of how long things will take you, okay? It won't take you very long. So just go through and be like, how long will that take me? I I like to have three sort of time frames that I work with. Either it's 30 minutes, or I actually use an app called Focus Mate actually to do, like when I want to really focus on something. So actually the way I divide my time, just to be more transparent, is 25 minutes or 50 minutes, or then I say half a day. So it's either half an hour or half a day, sometimes, or 2 hours. But the idea is to make that as simple as possible, and you're not trying to be too precise. And remember, at the beginning, you're just guessing. I teach you in Be the First what I call the Goldilocks gauge, and that is your ability to guess what is the right amount of time something will take you. So that is something that when you join, I'll be able to help you with as well. So you've got your best guess alongside with every task. And then your third one is to schedule everything in your calendar. And I mean everything. That's the goal. You want to get everything into your calendar. The first time you do this, when you're looking at this long list, it may seem overwhelming. How am I going to do it? You may be like, that's impossible. How am I going to fit that into a week? This, my friend, is the point. When you look at everything, you see all the things you have to do, right? And you look at the time there is available. That is great feedback. That is great information about the number of things you say yes to, the number of things that are on your plate, and the very finite amount of time, amount of hours there are in a day and in a week. What that means is saying yes to everything that comes through will no longer be an option, because you will already be clear and aware of the tasks that you already have, that most likely, because we tend to overestimate what we can get done and the time available, most likely you can't even fit into the schedule for the plan for the week, right? You want that information. It can feel really unpleasant. That's made me feel a bit sick before, when I've been like, wow, there's me thinking when I'm in like la la land that I can get all of this done in a week. But actually, when I look at the cold hard facts of like what's going on, how much I have to do, how long each task will take, there's just no way that's physically possible. It's great information. Okay, so key here when you're scheduling everything in your calendar is to do it in a certain order. Here's the order I want to recommend to you, because it prioritizes what is most, I want to say it prioritizes what is most important. But actually it's more about, for me, this has been the best way to fit what's important into the calendar rather than prioritizing it. So for example, your exercise and your self-care is extremely important. It may be that you can't prioritize it over every single meeting you have in your calendar. But what we want to make sure is it gets into your calendar, right? We don't want to have what matters most being the last thing you come to, because what you will end up with, which may be where you are now, is where a lot of you are now, is with a very full plan or very full calendar, and your self-care, what matters most, just gets completely neglected week after week after week. Makes for a very unhappy black lawyer, my friend. A very unhappy person, whatever industry you work in, right? We've got to be really making sure we're allocating time for what matters most. So this is the order I recommend for scheduling. Number one, you put in those calendar meetings and appointments. They will already most likely be in your calendar. I want to add here as a cheeky kind of, this isn't planning, but it kind of is connected. It's like, as you're looking at those appointments, like look out for appointments that don't need to be there or you don't need to attend. Especially the more senior you get, the more important it is you exercise judgment about the meetings that you agree to go to and those that you aren't available for, right? We'd all like to go to all of the meetings. Well, not sure about but we all think or recognize the importance or the value of going to lots of different meetings. Doesn't mean you should go to all of them. It doesn't mean your schedule allows you to go to all of them. So just be aware and have that kind of like looking out for that filter of like, is this meeting necessary? Do I need to be there? What's the value of this meeting? Okay. So calendar, you want your meetings and appointments in the calendar. Then I want to recommend you put in what matters most. So for me, that is putting in my exercise. It's putting in like the days that I'm going to try to walk in the morning. So I make sure I get a start with getting some steps up, because I do a lot of sitting in my work at the moment. So I get that in. And I also get in the time I'm going to spend connecting with my boys and with my husband, Paul. Yeah, that's really important. So that goes in. I do, of course, schedule in my personal life, right? I'm one person. For those of you who have two calendars, a work calendar and a home calendar, Here's what I want to offer. Having two separate calendars is like trying to be two separate people. The danger is your brain, right, might be imagining or thinking that you have more time in the day than the rest of us. You might have the impression that you can have a whole calendar of stuff to do in your personal life and a whole separate calendar of stuff to do in your professional life. But you have only one life and there is only one you. So what we want as much as possible is to integrate that. And there's a way to do that in Outlook where nobody else can see your personal commitments, but you can have them show up so you can see what's going on in your personal life as well as in your professional life. You get the whole picture in one place. I highly recommend that. Again, it's something I help you with in Be the First if this is something you struggle with. So calendar appointments, what matters most, get that in. Then the way I do it is I go to my overflow list because that tends to be stuff that's more likely to be like more urgent and overdue. Then I go to my master list, right, that I've been adding to throughout the week or as time has gone by. Then I put those items in and then I add my follow-up list. You could play around with the order of those last three things, but for me, the most important thing is to have your appointments in the calendar first so you can look at those and know you're committed to those, know what's coming up, and the what matters most, getting that in first before all of the other to-dos get a say. All right? I hope that is useful. That is literally the 3 steps. It's as simple as that. The 3 steps that are going to help you, that is how you plan the week, and it's going to help you manage overwhelm. Give you back some time control. Well, time control is what I call it and Be the First. It's going to give you back control over your time so you feel more in control, less overwhelmed, less exhausted, less stressed, less stuck. All right? Now, before you go, expect to have resistance to this. Expect your brain to go, oh, I'm too busy for this. This is too tedious. Okay, that's normal. What I want to offer is the discomfort of being out of control and overwhelmed is worse over the long run than the temporary discomfort of planning your week. Okay, very important to evaluate those 2 things. The second thing to expect is you are going to, especially if this is a story you've been living and telling yourself, you're going to say, it's too unpredictable, my schedule. I never know what's coming in. This won't work. And I want to offer that there are so many knowns in your schedule, they can go in your calendar. There are also known unknowns. I talked about those before, the things that you know are coming in. You just don't know exactly when they're coming in or maybe exactly how they will look. You can schedule in time for those too, right? Because then what happens is you'll be able to adapt, right, your calendar. I'm going to talk about that in the session in the next episode. You'll be able to move those things around in your calendar when those unknowns come in or when those known unknowns change, okay? So there's no excuse. There's going to be a resistance you're going to feel, but there's no excuse, no reason for you not to do this work. It will, I promise you, change your relationship with your work. It will change your relationship with yourself when you become the person who is more in control. You are driving, right? You're driving the bus and you're not trying to play catch up the whole time or driving the train. That's how I refer to it in Be the First. So good. And then what you're going to get as a result is you're going to get, as I've said, this relationship with time is going to change to the point where you can actually feel like, and one of my clients came out with this, it was just so powerful and beautiful recently, I create time. I'm someone who creates time. Imagine if that's how you thought about yourself and that's how you thought about time, and you could create it whenever you needed it. You could create it for what matters. You're going to feel more in control. You're going to be more efficient and organized. And of course, that's going to make you so much better at your job. You'll have more time for what matters and you're going to enjoy your job more. Of course you are, right? And again, I want to remind you of the long-term impact of this. You being a person who can always manage overwhelm, you being a person who has the skill set of taking control of your time. Love this for you. Now, before I go, just to see next week's, if you're concerned about planning the week and then the week not going to plan, don't worry, I have got you. That's exactly what next week's session is going to be about. We're going to talk about adapting the plan. So this week was making the plan, right? Planning the week. Next week, we're going to talk about the need to adapt the plan, which is, of course, essential because of the nature of this industry and the fact that there are those unknowns that come out of nowhere. And there are, of course, changes that happen even with the things you do know, the things you do have planned. So we want to be able to adapt to that. And there is a way of doing that keeps you out of overwhelm, and also like reinforces that feeling that you are the one in control. All right. All of this, I teach you. If it sounds like a lot, if it sounds like something hard to do by yourself, if you feel too much resistance, and you are a black lawyer, mid to senior level black lawyer, and like progression is a priority for you at the moment. You want to improve the way you work. You want to progress to the next level. If this is you, then I want to encourage you, invite you to join Be the First. That's my career progression program, specifically for black lawyers at mid to senior level who want to progress to that next level. All right. And in Be the First, one of the things we do is I teach you time control, which consists of all of these skills and tools that you develop that put you in control of your time so that you can manage overwhelm, so that you are someone who never falls into an overwhelm crisis, and so that you are someone who knows and has the confidence that when you progress to the next level, whatever that entails, you can be in control of that, you can manage that and stay out of overwhelm. I couldn't get those words out. All right. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you found this really, really useful. You will find in the notes to this session or in the show notes, wherever you're watching this, whether the video or wherever you're listening to it, you will find a link to my calendar where if you are a mid to senior level black lawyer, so only mid to senior level black lawyers, you can book directly into my calendar. Schedule a call with me. Let's talk about where you are. Let's talk about your next level of progression, and let's talk about how Be the First can help you get there. Thanks for listening. I'll be back next week. Bye for now.